We all know Cliff Burton for being the legendary Metallica bassist, but in reality, even before joining this band, he'd already made a name for himself.
Mr. Cliff Burton, alright!
So today, let's take a look at the journey the legendary Cliff Burton has taken before joining Metallica and see how it would eventually shape the sound of the biggest metal band on the planet. Here you go. As always guys, please do not hesitate to comment on anything you hear or see in this video, and especially if you disagree with me, because the whole point of our Metal Pilgrim show is of course to start a conversation. But alright, let's do it.
Great. They've been with us.
Yeah.
Even in the late 70s, so years before joining Metallica, Cliff Burton was actually not a stranger to the rock and metal scene of Bay Area. While still being in high school, he created a band called Easy Street, together with two of his schoolmates, future Face No More guitarist Jim Morton and future Ozzy Osbourne drummer Mike Borden, who would ironically later on go on to play with yet another Metallica bassist, Rob Trujillo. But Easy Street was a rather short-lived project, because, you know, graduation happened, and after it, Borden parted ways with Burton and Morton, who entered college and created yet another band titled Agents of Misfortune. And it was this band which would eventually enter a bunch of local band competitions, including the one in Hayward, where Cliff played parts of the future Metallica song Anesthesia Pulling Teeth. And it did turn heads even then. But in reality, this contest did not only showcase Cliff's talent, but also gave him something much more than that.
Are you ready to do it, Cliff?
As future Trauma frontman Donnie Hiller recalled many years later, it was during one of those shows in Hayward when Cliff Burton and the band he was playing with at that time saw him and immediately wanted him to become their vocalist. Afterwards, they came to Donnie's apartment in Oakland, and after several rehearsals, everything clicked. The set was put together very quickly, and the band we know together as Trauma, the very first real band for Cliff Burton, was born. The band quickly hit the road and played extensively anywhere in the area, becoming one of the early forerunners of the Bay Area metal sound, and quite aggressive one for that time, if we're being very honest. Moreover, they even were able to get a manager from the metal hotbed itself, England. And as Danny Hiller later on recalled, that guy was actually quite aggressive. He didn't shy away from doing any kind of business that would eventually make Trauma big. And for a while, and especially at the beginning, it actually did work. And although Trauma did not get as big as Metallica, not even close, in 1982 Trauma got a place on the second issue of the Metal Massacre compilation, together with Armored Saint, Warlock, Overkill, Savage Grace, and Marty Friedman's first band Aloha, with their first ever hit, Such a Shame. And it was actually during that year when Trauma made their first proper release, a 3-song demo tape simply called Demo 1 that also included Such a Shame, yet in a slightly different version, and 2 absolutely new songs, The Beat of the Street and Does the Music. Yet the success of that band did not last for too long, because just shortly after that release, everything changed for Cliff Burton, and that eventually led to everything changing in the world of metal. What happened afterwards is known to pretty much every die-hard Metallica fan. Back in 1982, Trauma had a show in the legendary Whiskey A Go-Go in Los Angeles, and in the crowd there were 2 guys. Their names, of course, were Lars and James, and they also happened to have a small band of their own. James Hetfield was simply amazed by Cliff's shredding, and together with Lars they decided to recruit Cliff for Metallica. And given the fact that Cliff himself was rather dissatisfied how things were at Trauma, stating that the band started to get a little too commercial for his own taste, and he, out of all the people, actually found commercial attitude in music to be rather annoying, which I think is a rather interesting thing, but that's a topic for a completely different video. But nevertheless, as Donnie Hiller later on recalled, Cliff was very grounded but very focused and knew exactly what he wanted to do musically, and that resulted in him eventually agreeing to join Metallica to pursue a much heavier sound than he could in Trauma. Yet Yet still there was one little obstacle. Back in the day, Metallica was still in Los Angeles, and Cliff Burton was in the Bay Area, and had absolutely no intentions to relocate. And so, given the fact that Metallica came to him, and not vice versa, he set a condition for Metallica to relocate to the Bay Area for him to join the band. Which, as we all know, after not that much contemplation, James and Lars agreed to do. And the rest is, of course, history. And here I just wanted to thank everyone who purchases Metal Pilgrim merch. Guys, it is thanks to you and thanks to all my patrons and YouTube channel members that I am able to release these videos amidst all the craziness of being in Ukraine these days.
How does it feel? Sorry about that.
But nevertheless, after Cliff Burton left Trauma, the band did not cease to exist. Even more, they actually started growing quite a bit.
Yes, I am growing stronger. Yes.
After Cliff's departure, they recruited bassist Luis Advincula, released their debut full-length album Scratch and Scream via Shrapnel Records in 1984, and disbanded a year later.
The number of the beast, they must settle the question.
What is interesting to mention is that Scratch and Scream did not actually feature any songs from Demo 1. It was all brand new material. But back in 2013, Donny Hiller and drummer Chris Gustafsson decided to reform Trauma. And first, they re-released Scratch and Scream, this time with 3 bonus songs from Cliff Burton era, one of which was Such a Shame, a Metal Massacre 2 version, and another 2 were previously unreleased songs We're Going Off and Woman Be Gone. Afterwards, the band managed to release 2 more studio albums, Rapture and Wrath in 2015 and As the World Dies in 2018, before the frontman Donny Hiller sadly passed away from lung disease in 2020. And the sad irony is that it actually happened on September 28th, the day after the 31st anniversary of the death of the legendary Cliff Burton. But even after the death of their mastermind, Trauma did not stop. They recruited new vocalist Brian Allen, who last year also joined Metal Church, and back in 2022 released their 4th studio album, Awakening. And for the longest time ever, Trauma did not actually play any of the Cliff Burton songs live, and never even recorded those, considering it to be a disrespect to the legendary Cliff Burton. Yet, nevertheless, last February, in the Castro Valley, during a very special event titled the Cliff Burton Day, Trauma finally broke that rule and performed all of the Cliff Burton songs live. So that's about it. That's the story of Cliff Burton and his major band before joining Metallica. And although Cliff's tenure at either of the 3 bands before Metallica was not long, Cliff Burton brought several musical ideas from his time in Trauma that later became iconic moments in Metallica songs. The moments that eventually would shape the sound of this band. With the most famous example, of course, being the bass piece that evolved into Anesthesia Pulling Teeth, which Cliff had already been performing as a distorted, wah-driven bass solo during his Trauma days, and exactly the one that actually caught the ears of both James and Lars at that Whiskey A Go-Go concert. And the other one, of course, being the bell-like bass motive that later opened For Whom the Bell Tolls, a part Cliff originally developed as a melodic bass figure before Metallica turned it into one of the most recognizable intros in the history of metal. And what do you guys personally think about that music? Do you like any of the pre-Metallica Cliff Burton songs? And if so, which one is your favorite? Please let us know in the comments. As always, thank you so much for watching this short video, guys, and we will prevail. Slava Ukraini!